We're back. A widespread Republican push in nearly 30 states now is targeting traditionally Democratic constituents like college students and African Americans and making it more difficult for them to vote. 29 states have adopted already or are considering adopting laws that would require citizens to show a government-issued form of identification before they cast a ballot. The problem, approximately 20 million people do not have a current government photo ID. Well, Judith Browne Dianis is a co-director of the Advancement Project, an advocacy group of civil rights lawyers, and Horace Cooper is a senior fellow at the Heartland Institute who specializes in election reform. Sir, for the affirmative, why do we have to have government ID cards as a requirement to vote when we haven't had them before?
Well, it's a very useful way to make sure that the person who shows up to vote is actually the person who's registered and lawfully allowed to.
So you would require government ID cards?
I think it's a good policy. It's a very effective way to make sure.
So you would require government ID cards?
It's a very good way.
Help me out. You would require government ID cards?
Where there are fraudulent examples of this, and there are quite a few places where that is the case, this is a very effective solution.
But why are you hesitant to say these laws would require...
I didn't say that it has to be a federal law that comes from everywhere.
States
should, yes.
Should states require a government-issued ID card?
Yes, they should.
Requirement?
Yes, they should.
What would be the problem with that, with people being asked, people of all ages, college students, whatever? You can vote at 18 under our Constitution now. What would be the requirement? What would it do to people?
It would block voters from voting. This is all a concerted effort setting up what's going to happen in 2012. We're going to see a lot of voter suppression efforts moving forward.
This is voter suppression.
I mean, clearly. I mean, within the first 2 months of this year, after the Republicans took over houses across the state, they pushed these voter ID bills. 21 million Americans do not have government photo ID.
Do any Democrats push bills like this?
No, they're not pushing it.
Because that's absolutely not the case.
Well,
let me get a fact. Do any Democrats, push one of these?
That's absolutely not the case. When you look at these legislatures, those bills are also being supported by Democrats and Republicans.
No, are there any Democrat ever introduced a bill such as this that you know of?
Not that I know of, but I don't know the names of the Republicans that have introduced these bills. The point is that this is a bipartisan issue. In the state of Virginia, which has also moved on this front, in the state of Arizona...
How come everything I know about it tells me that Democrats don't like these kind of bills?
You mean Washington Democrats?
Well, Democrats I know.
Well, Washington Democrats aren't the same thing as Americans across the board, bipartisan, Republicans and Democrats agree that this is a problem and this is an effective way to solve it.
I mean, let's talk about the way most people voted. Remind people how they normally vote right now in America. They go to vote they walk up, luckily it's a couple blocks away, it might be at a school or a community center. They walk in, there's a line, you check in, you get your name, you sign something, right?
You give your name, you sign something, and you go and vote.
Okay, and that's usually somebody recognizes you from the neighborhood. Hi, Marge, you're here.
That's right.
Nice to see you today.
Been here for 20 years voting.
Yeah, okay. And they don't have to show an ID card.
You don't have to show ID. There's probably about 4 states that require photo ID.
Here's my question. What happens when that person, an 85-year-old, 50, whatever, and they've always voted the same way. They vote, they walk down, they vote. And the person is across the table from, hi, Marge, where's your government ID card, Marge? And they said, well, you know me. Yeah, I know you, but you still have to have the card. What would you do then? Would that person be allowed to vote?
That's the same thing that the bank says. That's the same thing that the grocery store says.
Should that person be allowed to vote?
But this isn't right.
Every single one of these transactions.
Using a credit card.
That's part of the reason why I challenge this notion that there's 20 million of these people out there. The lion's share of Americans must have ID for all of the activities that they come in. Government ID to carry out their responsibilities.
Well, first of all, city people generally, not to generalize, but if you live in a big city, you don't necessarily have a driver's license.
No, you don't, but you still have an ID. Because
what would be your form of ID card?
You would need it for accessing the library. You would need it for getting your electricity services turned on. There are a number of reasons.
You need a social security number. You don't necessarily need a photo ID.
This is the reason why in most jurisdictions, they actually will let you have a government-issued ID. And in fact, increasingly across the country, if you have some kind of financial hardship, you can still get the ID at a discount or free. The truth is, organizations like this one simply don't want to ensure that the person who shows up, because there are people who are double voting. There are people who are ghost voting.
She's a crook.
There are people, if she wants to enable.
I protect people's voting rights. That's what I'm about.
You're not protecting anyone's right to vote. If you cancel out
Okay,
the
here's
vote
my
of
question.
a real
I want to ask you. I want to ask you about reality because I'm not an expert on this except I vote. And when I went to vote, it's almost always a community. I'm lucky enough to live in Maryland, across the border here. And when I walk in there to vote, they sort of know everybody. And, people with the signs give me hello, they give me some trouble, whatever they're up to. But it's pretty much a community involvement. If you tell some woman who walks there, a male who walks there, and say, you're not voting today because you don't have a government ID, and the person says, well, I haven't driven in years, or I don't have a government ID, you tell them they can't vote. What's going to happen in that moment?
My mother-in-law.
What will happen at that moment?
What will happen at that moment is the same thing that will happen when people show up and they're in the wrong precinct. You're not allowed to vote. It could be presidential election day. You are not allowed to
So when you walk down the street in your own neighborhood, you can't vote.
You're not allowed to go to the wrong precinct.
And even if they know you,
you can't.
You won't let a person vote if they all know you.
Even if
that's crazy.
Even if you're in the wrong precinct, you can't.
You got to let people vote if you know.
The land.
No,
that's not the law.
You can't stop a person from voting. Thank you, Judith. This is an incredible idea. You can't tell people from their own neighborhood they can't vote, Horace. You can't. Well, Horace Cooper, go see him if you want to vote.